For the last couple years on this show, I reviewed either pieces of coal or something that would put someone in a bad mood after watching it on the first week of December, and that's no fun. It's like, what a great way to kick off the holiday season with these carols. Deck the halls with Pyrrha's dead body, fa la 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 la. So screw that. Also, sorry for your ears bursting. We're going to look at some festive Christmas films for the first week of December. And what better way to do that than to review something that a lot of people probably saw growing up. The holiday films created by the Rankin Company. Founded in 1960, the Rankin Company is mostly well known for their holiday specials, as well as their use of stop-motion animation that was made in Tokyo, Japan, which is seen in a lot of these specials released during the company's lifetime. The company went defunct in 1987, but their legacy is still remembered even decades later in the form of these films, and will likely be remembered for years to come, whether it be because of their animation, story, charm, or even the catchy music and memorable characters. We're not going to cover all of them today, since there exists up to 17 holiday specials produced by this company from 1964 and 1985, but I do want to kick off this little look back on these films that made me smile as a kid around the holiday season by looking at the first 4 holiday specials / films released in chronological order. Also, let me know if you want me to do more of these specials in the future, or maybe even later this month if I have the time, since I really do love these specials, and it'll be interesting for me to watch some of these again with a more adult mindset. Speaking of which, any jokes I make in this are all in good fun. I do have some issues with these films, yes, and these films have shown their age, but these still put a smile on my face while watching them, and they are nowhere near as bad as some of the other stuff I've looked at in the past. So with all that said, let's start off with Rudolph. First off, get a look at this promotion of the broadcast back then. It's cheesy in a good way and old, yes, but I specifically noticed this text. General Electric presents another full color fantasy hour. Oh, I'm sure bootleg Three Stooges guy over here is having some fantasies about that snowman right now. He's certainly dreaming of a white Christmas. Anyways, as the title states, this film is an adaptation of the original song written in 1939. We get Rudolph's red nose, it glowing, though frankly I think that's because he got just some nasty poison ivy here going off the texture of these leaves. Then here from the Reindeer games by the guy who would later voice Jameson in the 60s Spider-Man, etc. But on top of that, we also get scenes as well as side plots about Rudolph growing up, as well as befriending not only an elf who wants to be a dentist instead of a toy maker, on top of him falling in love with Clarice, a female reindeer, and both their chemistry is handled pretty well, and both their interactions with Rudolph felt natural and nice, which I do appreciate. We also get to see the island of misfit toys, aka the remains of Toys R Us, and their adventures on the island, as well as Rudolph having to save his family from the snowman creature, on top of him earning love and respect from his family despite their previous hatred of him for said red nose. And all of these were nice to see. Not only because it makes the story more interesting, but it also makes some of the characters more interesting as well. Especially with Rudolph and Claire / Hermie the Elf, who come across as characters with a lot more depth to them than I originally thought with a film like this. We see their goals, their chemistry with other characters, and even see them kicking ass / being good people in this film. It's not amazing, especially when compared to films with deeper storytelling, but for the time, as well as the type of film this was, I liked it. Not every character is great or interesting though, especially the other reindeers, and even the villain / Yukon, as well as, Santa, but our main leads are pretty good, and some of the supporting cast I mentioned earlier is also pretty good. Though I do find it funny that most of these people disown Rudolph for this red nose, yet they're okay with the potential incest going on with the Clauses calling each other Mama and Papa. I think that's a bigger problem than someone's nose lighting up like a match, but I get it. Source material and all that, so let's move on to something else. For 1964, the animation and music are pretty good. The songs are remixes of the original song, catch / great to listen to for the most part, and even the models used still look pretty good despite them looking a bit dated nowadays. Of course, a lot of the puppet figures used back then were destroyed / gone due to the time period and the production team having no clue what the future value of these would hold, but still, they look pretty good for 1964, and it's good to see a few of them are still around to this day. Hell, even with the occasional glitches / stutters in the movement sometimes, the stop motion is also pretty good for the time. Especially for a 50-minute film that required hundreds of hours of animation back in the day. Though in this world, the snow seems to be pretty magical as it transformed the world of live action into a stop-motion world in a matter of years. I don't even think Elsa could do that. The most she could do is probably kill Heartless and make a sequel that has people arguing about her sexuality. Speaking of, an Aurora Borealis, at this time of year, at this time of night, in this part of the film, localized entirely within this review. Yes, it is. But yeah, there's really not much else I could say about this film. It's a really great story expanding the original song and poem and giving me a Rudolph who begins thinking he's an outcast, but by the end, proves that anyone can make a difference in the world no matter what they look like, backed up by great songs and a good supporting cast. There's a reason I watch this every year when I can, and I highly recommend it, even as an adult. It has still aged well to an extent despite my snark earlier, and yeah, it's not perfect, but I still like it, and I can even appreciate elements about it that I didn't notice as a child, like the animation or the characters itself. Like the song itself, Rudolph will go down in history, but in a good way. So yeah, starting off on a strong note here, let's move on to the next film. Starting off, the animation's taken a nosedive in comparison to Rudolph, not only because of the models looking horrifying, he got his eyes! But I also noticed a lot more stutters and glitches when compared to Rudolph. Even the color palette isn't my cup of tea, going from a bright and colorful palette to a more washed out and darker / blander color palette this time around. Even for the setting this film takes place in, that being the area around Jerusalem, it's still not my cup of tea and it's pretty forgettable to look at. Speaking of editing, there's cases where sound effects and music isn't done that well or even barely exist to begin with. Take this scene of one of the characters smashing a jar, for instance. Normally, a sound effect is played for the sake of emphasizing the impact, but it's not present in some of these scenes, and that's kind of confusing because it shows up in other scenes from time to time. I mean, what kind of fool would forget to put in sound effects for a big scene? The music is also just okay. Maybe it's because I wasn't a big fan of the original song this movie is adapting into a special, but even the non-remix songs aren't that memorable on their own while listening to them in the film. Is the story at least good? Yeah, it's fine. Basically, it's about these two guys who want to take Aaron, the titular drummer boy, and put him in their caravan to profit off him, and as the film goes on, we see Aaron's character arc of hating humans for killing his parents as a kid, and by the end of the film, he feels kindness towards them again after he places his drum for the baby Jesus, and his goat is healed. Despite having half the runtime of the last film, this being 25 minutes, it's a story that does an effective job establishing the world this film takes place in, as well as Aaron's character arc. It's not amazing nor memorable, especially when compared to Rudolph's story, but it works for what this film is trying to do. But yeah, there's really not a whole lot for me to say about this film in all honesty. The animation isn't as great, the characters aren't all that interesting outside of Aaron, and the story is just okay. It's ultimately harmless though, and I could see why some people like it, and more power to you if you do, but I'm not one of them. But if I saw this on TV at one point in the future, I'd probably still watch it, because like I said, it's ultimately harmless, far from the worst film / special I've seen, and it has its good traits in the end, even if I may not agree with some of them. 2 down, 2 to go. Like the last two, this is an adaptation of a popular Christmas song, and also like the last special, it's 25 minutes. But unlike the last two, this was done with a different animation style entirely, 2D animation. And for the time, it looks alright. It does have some instances of disappearing objects / cut off hands, but the colors are vibrant, the animation is fluid, and the character models look pretty good for 2D animation in the 60s. Probably because the character and background drawing are handled by Paul Coker Jr., who was also an artist for Mad Magazine, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know which is worse, that pun or the concept that a bunch of kids are hanging around with white stuff for most of the movie. And while you cringe from that thought, let's get into my thoughts on the story. As an adaptation, it hits the basic notes of the original song just like the other two, but there isn't really a lot here that really expands upon the original song or the story or characters like Rudolph did. Admittedly, that could be because of its shorter runtime, but it's still disappointing. With the exception of Frosty, Karen, and our antagonist Tinkle, most of the main cast and supporting cast is really forgettable and bland characters, and as time went on, I ultimately kind of forgot they existed. Even then, the remaining 3 characters aren't all that great either, just okay at best. Hell, when the threat of Karen potentially dying in the snow came up, I was like, oh, okay, gotta save, what was her name? Karen. Maybe if the film gave her more to do, / made me care about her as a character more, I might have felt something. But since they didn't, well, here we are. A potentially adult man holding a little girl in his arms in the snow. Quick! Someone get some magical orbs! I hear they can revive pointlessly killed off children! Frosty existed, I guess. Not really much I can say about him outside of him being a good person, saving Karen from the cold snow. And Hinkle is kind of bland as a villain, even for the time. But yeah, the voices and music are fine. Nothing really memorable though, like last time. The pacing is fine, and the film is just okay. It's not bad, it's not great, it's just okay. But I feel like more could have been done to it. Maybe more of a runtime, maybe make the 3 characters mentioned earlier more interesting, that kind of stuff. But on its own, like Drummer Boy, it's ultimately harmless, and I can see why people like it even to this day. It's just not my thing. And with that, we have 1 film left. Santa Claus is coming to town. And going off this buster, he's not the only one coming. Unlike the other specials thus far, this adaptation feels the most like, well, an original work instead of an outright adaptation of the song in question, as it tells the origin story of Santa Claus, aka Kris Kringle, as well as the origin of his toy workshop, his meeting with the future Mrs. Claus, and how he got his reindeer and powers. And I really like this. Not only because it feels more like a story is being told instead of just a song being adapted, but also because it's executed pretty well and has some interesting twists and developments that put a smile on my face. Same with the character of Kris Kringle, who comes across as a genuinely nice person despite his past, and his action / kindness despite the king of the town that he's delivering toys to constantly trying to put him down and or stop his actions, make me want to root for him as a character, which is a good thing, especially since he's our hero in this story. I also felt the chemistry with his family and Jessica, aka the future Mrs. Claus, was also handled pretty well. And sure, Jessica isn't as developed as other characters I've seen in other films, both holiday and non-holiday, but she wasn't a terrible character. Even the puppets for this are pretty good. A lot more detailed and colorful when compared to Drummer Boy, though some of them look like, well, yeah, they look like they took some drugs. Probably from this guy's stash. I mean, he does have talking children in them, so it's possible he could stash a little White Christmas in there while he's at it.
Or other things.
Even the songs are really good this time around, for the most part. Whether it be their lyrics, composition, or beat, a lot of the songs are catchy, memorable, and pretty good for both the time and even today. The titular Santa Claus is coming to town, put one foot in front of the other. Sure, the song Be Prepared to Pay is aged poorly and has some awkward lyrics about kissing an adult man to get a toy, and I could see why some parents cut that song out, but the rest of the songs are pretty good, and that's really great to see. The rest of the characters are fine. Not really anything to write home about, though. They're about as bland as the town becomes when the villain bans toys, and you may think that only means the kids don't have fun. Given Jessica and the others having miserable expressions on their faces, I think they do have a few special toys they like to play with that got taken away thanks to the ban. So thank goodness Chris came by to give them some toys regardless of the ban, otherwise who knows what would have happened to them if it wasn't for him and his little friend. That was terrible. Who the hell wrote this? Oh, right. Me. So with that, I think that's all I have to say about this. Overall, I'm glad I got the chance to see these films again, and while films like Drummer Boy and Frosty are fantastic, though not terrible, Rudolph and Santa Claus is Coming to Town are still great films decades after they originally came out, and I'm really glad to say that. So in terms of ranking, Santa would be at the top, followed by Rudolph in a very, very close second. Frosty would be third, and Drummer Boy is in last place. It will very likely change as I see more of these in the future, and I hope you'll join me for those next time I cover them, whether it be later this month or next Christmas. Until then, I'm David Grimm, and thanks for watching. Now, if you excuse me, I have some work to do, because around this time of year, Red Ribbon Reviewers begins, which is a campaign meant to promote AIDS awareness, and I'm going to do my part to help raise awareness through these videos as well as promoting these charities. Even if you aren't a content creator, promoting/donating to these charities is still a good idea, especially around this time of year. It helps get the word out and helps these charities in one day finding a cure for HIV and AIDS. So yeah, that is all I have to say. See you next time.